Key points. Political chaos. Streets in Islamabad and beyond are in chaos, with disruptions in communication, life, and lack of information on news channels. Two sides, no conclusion. The opposition feels empowered by people, while the government believes in its institutional power. Both are locked in a continuous struggle, with neither side accepting defeat. Long-running political drama. The political situation is compared to a never-ending soap opera. The government pretends to maintain a functional state, while the opposition thrives on demographic changes. PTI's youth power. The younger generation in PTI is actively taking to the streets, confident in their ability to bring change. They support Imran Khan without much need for party leadership. PPP and PMLN out of touch. Older political parties like PPP and PMLN struggle to connect with modern strategies, relying more on the establishment than public support. Exhausted political leaders. PPP and PMLN leaders appear exhausted from decades of political struggles. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari is seen as a king in waiting, and the PMLN leadership seems indifferent to the current political crisis. Evolving power dynamics. The establishment is focusing on centralizing power without direct involvement in politics. Managing elections in parliament has become challenging, with increasing public pushback. Judiciary's role. The judges, especially defiant ones, are emboldened by public support, creating tension with the establishment. Conflict in KP and Supreme Court transition. Tensions are rising in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa due to security issues, and there are efforts to influence the transition in the Supreme Court, sparking more political instability. Crux in simple words. The article highlights the ongoing political instability in Pakistan, where the opposition and government are stuck in a never-ending power struggle. The younger generation of PTI supporters feels they can change the future by taking to the streets, while older parties like PPP and PMLN seem tired and disconnected from the people. The establishment is trying to maintain control without getting directly involved, but public resistance and the involvement of judges are making this difficult. Political leadership is exhausted, and there's growing tension in regions like Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, adding to the chaos. Key points. CNN reporters' coverage bias. A CNN journalist showcased Israeli bombings in Yemen, but no coverage followed on Israeli airbase damage from Iranian missiles due to Israel's censorship. Embedded journalism issues. Embedded journalism, where reporters are attached to military units, often results in biased or one-sided stories, promoting propaganda during conflicts. Historical examples of media bias. Embedded journalism was used during conflicts like Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, shaping narratives in favor of the military or political powers. Journalists who challenge the norm. Journalists like Julian Assange, Mordecai Vanunu, and Seymour Hersh push back against media control, exposing truths hidden by governments. Seymour Hersh and Hassan Nasrallah. Hersh's meeting with Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in 2003 showed how Nasrallah outsmarted American attempts to rig Iraqi elections. Jewish intellectuals against Zionism. Many Jewish intellectuals, such as Elon Popp and Norman Finkelstein, criticize Israeli policies, showing that not all Jews support Zionism. Propaganda and misrepresentation. There's confusion between religious identities and political ideologies, such as between Judaism and Zionism, or Hinduism and Hindutva. The article criticizes biased media coverage, particularly how embedded journalism tends to report one-sided stories during conflicts, protecting the interests of military or political powers. A CNN reporter's selective coverage of Israeli military actions highlights this problem. However, journalists like Seymour Hersh challenge these biases by uncovering truths that governments try to hide. The article also emphasizes that opposition to Israeli policies is growing, even within the Jewish community, separating the ideas of Zionism from Judaism. Finally, it points out how propaganda blurs the line between religion and politics. Key points. Urban water crisis in Pakistan. Nearly 43% of Pakistan's urban population lacks access to water, making it a major service delivery failure. Water depletion. Groundwater levels in cities are falling rapidly, such as 1.7 meters annually in Islamabad, contributing to the growing water scarcity. Climate change and urban disparities. Climate change intensifies issues like poor air quality, temperature rise, and water scarcity, disproportionately affecting poorer communities. Mismanagement of urban resources. The excessive concretization of cities leads to water runoff, flooding, and groundwater depletion. Flawed land use policies and car-centric infrastructure add to the environmental strain. Private housing and unchecked water use. Private housing societies often drill boreholes to access water, exacerbating groundwater depletion. This lack of regulation leads to free, unchecked water extraction by the affluent. Service gaps for the poor. The poorest 43% of urban dwellers lack access to water, 67% lack solid waste management, and 18% lack sanitation. Charging for water. Experts argue for charging for water use to ensure sustainable consumption, but this must be done equitably, ensuring that a basic minimum amount is provided for free. Proposed solutions. Suggestions include investing in water metering, taxing excess water use, and using these funds to improve infrastructure and ensure equitable water distribution. Crux, in simple words. Pakistan cities are facing a severe water crisis, with nearly half of the urban population lacking access to water. The problem is worsened by groundwater depletion, poor urban planning, and unchecked water use, especially by affluent households. Climate change makes the situation worse, hitting the poor hardest. Solutions lie in better regulation, equitable water distribution, and investments in infrastructure to ensure everyone has access to clean water while addressing issues like water wastage and environmental degradation. Key points. UN General Assembly on AMR. A high-level meeting at the UN General Assembly provided renewed political commitment and funding pledges to address antimicrobial resistance, AMR, globally. Impact of AMR. AMR affects humans, animals, and the environment, causing higher mortality, economic losses, compromised health from infections, and increased poverty due to rising healthcare costs. AMR is predicted to push 28 million people into poverty, with 26 million in low-income countries. Alarming mortality rates. A recent Lancet study estimates 1.91 million deaths currently attributable to AMR, with projections of 8.22 million deaths by 2050. South Asia, including Pakistan, is identified as a hotspot. AMR in Pakistan. In 2019, AMR led to 59,200 deaths in Pakistan, and this figure is expected to rise. Pakistan is likely to be one of the worst affected countries in South Asia. Global and national action plans. Many countries, including Pakistan, are revising their national action plans on AMR. A global target aims to fund 60% of these plans by 2030, with updates to the WHO's Global Action Plan by 2026. Funding appeal. A $100 million funding appeal for national action plans was launched, and the goal of a 10% reduction in AMR-related deaths by 2030 was set. One Health approach. A multi-sectoral approach under the One Health framework, guided by the quadripartite arrangement, is essential for coordinated global action against AMR. Need for political commitment in Pakistan. The urgency of addressing AMR in Pakistan requires strong political will, consistent funding, and implementation of an updated national action plan to mitigate the growing threat. Crux, in simple words, antimicrobial resistance, AMR, is a growing global health crisis, especially in regions like South Asia. With increasing deaths linked to AMR, including significant numbers in Pakistan, immediate action is needed. Recent global meetings have renewed commitments to funding and action plans, but Pakistan must prioritize AMR containment through sustained political resolve and resource allocation. Enhanced collaboration under the One Health approach and revised national strategies are essential to prevent millions of future deaths and economic hardship. Key points. Recent terrorist incidents. A series of terrorist attacks over the weekend in Pakistan has underscored the country's complex security challenges. Notably, a bombing near Karachi airport killed at least 3 people, including 2 Chinese nationals. Claims of responsibility. The banned Baloch Liberation Army's Majid Brigade has claimed responsibility for the Karachi attack, which appears to target foreign nationals, particularly Chinese workers. Casualties among security forces. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, KP, and Balochistan, several security personnel were killed in clashes with militants, including 13 Army and Frontier Corps FC members in North Waziristan and Kurram, along with 3 others in a roadside bombing in Kalat. Implications for international events. The timing of the Karachi attack raises concerns as high-ranking foreign dignitaries are set to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization (SCO) summit in Islamabad. The attack may have been an attempt to disrupt this important event. Chinese embassy's response. The Chinese embassy has strongly urged Pakistan to conduct a thorough investigation into the attack and ensure the safety of Chinese nationals and projects in the country, highlighting the need for better protection. Economic impact. The incidents pose a significant threat to Pakistan's economic recovery efforts and its efforts to re-engage internationally. Given that Karachi Airport is supposed to be a secure area, the attack raises questions about security lapses. Diverse militant threat. The attacks highlight the variety of militant threats in Pakistan, which includes separatist groups and religiously motivated fighters. Addressing these threats is essential for national stability. Call for effective security measures. The state must prioritize counterterrorism efforts over political repression, focusing on intelligence-based operations to preempt attacks. Without addressing these threats, economic development and recovery will be severely hindered. Crux, in simple words. Recent terrorist attacks in Pakistan, including a deadly bombing near Karachi Airport that targeted Chinese nationals, reveal a serious and varied security threat facing the country. The state must urgently investigate these incidents, especially with the upcoming SCO summit, as they pose risks to economic recovery and international relations. The government needs to enhance security measures, focusing on preventing attacks rather than suppressing political opposition to ensure a stable environment for development. Key points. Banning the PTM. The government's decision to ban the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, PTM, under the Anti-Terrorism Act is criticized as a misguided attempt to suppress dissent rather than a legitimate national security concern. History of repression. Historically, heavy-handed government actions against dissent have been counterproductive, often worsening tensions and alienating marginalized communities instead of quelling unrest. Call for transparency. If the government has credible allegations against the PTM or its members, it should pursue transparent legal proceedings rather than a blanket ban, which only serves to isolate the supportive community further. Support for PTM. The movement's support is rooted in the issues it addresses, not merely its name. This support was evident when 2 PTM-associated members were elected to Parliament without the movement's label, indicating the depth of the underlying concerns. Radicalization risks. The ban could inadvertently push disaffected individuals toward radical elements by fostering resentment against the state, which is seen as suppressing legitimate grievances. Conflation of movements. Equating a rights-based movement like the PTM with violent terrorist groups is counterproductive and can escalate tensions rather than restore order. Underlying grievances. The Pashtun population has expressed concerns over neglect, discrimination, state violence, and enforced disappearances. The PTM has been a platform for these grievances, and banning it silences constitutional voices. Need for dialogue. Instead of bans and violent crackdowns, the government should engage in dialogue and reforms to address the root causes of discontent, such as the issues of missing persons and political representation. Mutual listening required. Both the state and the PTM must be willing to listen to each other's concerns to foster a more peaceful and stable environment. Crux, in simple words. The government's decision to ban the PTM is seen as a harmful attempt to silence dissent rather than a necessary security measure. History shows that such heavy-handed actions can increase tensions and push marginalized groups away from the state. If there are real concerns about the PTM, the government should handle them through transparent legal processes instead of a ban, which only alienates its supporters. The PTM highlights important issues like state violence and missing persons, and banning it will silence legitimate voices. For real peace and stability, the government needs to address these grievances through dialogue rather than resorting to repression. Key points. Indus water dispute. The ongoing tensions over the distribution of Indus water under the 1991 Water Apportionment Accord remain unresolved, impacting relations between Punjab and Sindh for nearly 35 years. Sindh's stance. Sindh is demanding that water distribution be based on the original shares allocated in the accord, rather than the historical usage model currently in practice. This has led to a harder stance during recent meetings of the water regulator, IRSA. Balochistan's support. Balochistan has sided with Sindh, complicating the federal government's and Punjab's ability to manage the issue effectively. Assumed water availability. The dispute centers around the flawed assumption that Pakistan has 117.35 million acre-feet (MF) of water to distribute, which has never been the case and is unlikely to be accurate in future distributions. Lack of provisions for shortages. The 1991 Accord lacks a clear solution for scenarios where available water is less than the assumed distribution amount, leading to confusion and conflict. Historical usage distribution. IRSA's current practice of distributing water based on historical usage has led to Sindh feeling that its share is significantly reduced, adversely affecting the environmental flow into the sea. Technical grounds for denial. Punjab and the federal government have dismissed Sindh's demands for a share based on the accord, citing technicalities and asserting that the matter is with the Council of Common Interests. Need for revision. Given the growing water scarcity in Pakistan, it is imperative to revisit the 1991 Accord to ensure that water shares are based on actual flows and to clarify ambiguities regarding the distribution of surpluses and shortages. Urgency of resolution. Delaying a resolution will only exacerbate the existing complexities of the water distribution issue, making it increasingly difficult to manage interprovincial relations. Crux, in simple words. The unresolved water distribution issues between Punjab and Sindh under the 1991 Water Apportionment Accord need urgent revision. Sindh is insisting on its original water shares instead of the historical usage model, and Balochistan supports this stance. The accord assumes a fixed amount of water that isn't realistically available, and it doesn't address what to do when there's less water to share. The current distribution practice negatively affects Sindh's share and environmental needs. To address rising water scarcity, it's essential to update the agreement based on actual water flows and clarify how shortages are handled. Delaying a solution will only make the problem worse.